So, a recent study out of MIT showed that writers who depend on large language models like ChatGPT for their writing, if they do this for an extended period of time, they actually might be in danger of stunting their ability to write, recall, and even think clearly. So today I want to talk about how should Christians think about our own engagement with AI tools in light of these findings. Well, welcome to the Redeeming Productivity Show. This is the podcast helps Christians get more done and get it done like Christians. And I'm your host, Reagan Rose. Now listen, if you've been around for a while, you know that I have been gone for a while. Had this podcast going since 2019, and the last couple months I haven't really posted anything, at least in the video version, though I have been doing some audio episodes. So sorry about that. Life's been busy. I've been focused a lot of my attention on the Academy, which is our membership program, and a lot of attention on life stuff too. Been doing some house projects and that kind of stuff. So sorry. I'm going to try to get back on the wagon here of posting more frequently. So I wanted to comment on this research that came out of MIT because I think that it points out some things about AI that a lot of us have been suspecting, and I think it would be wise as Christians for us to think through some of the implications of what they found. So the study I'm talking about is this one. It came out of MIT. They published this cutely titled little paper called Your Brain on ChatGPT, Accumulation of Cognitive Debt When Using an AI Assistant for Essay Writing Task. Wow, that is a snappy headline. Basically, they did this study and they found some things that are a little bit alarming. And there's been a lot of articles written on this, a lot of people commenting on some of the findings from this study and just what it means for us as we grow more dependent on AI. So I just want to quickly kind of recap what happened, what they discover in the study about people who use AI a lot, and what are some sort of implications that we can draw out as Christians that help us use these tools wisely but discerningly. Okay. So let's begin with the study. So the study itself consisted of MIT researchers asking 54 students to write a series of essays over the course of several months. Okay. And so they divided these students into three groups. So you've got the LLM group. LLM stands for large language model. Basically, these people were writing essays with the assistance of ChatGPT. Then they had the search engine group, and they were writing their essays without AI assistance, but they were using Google, just search, not the AI tools in Google, just search. And then there was sort of the control group, the brain-only group, we'll call them. And they were writing without any tools to assist them at all. Okay, so you've got a group using AI, a group using just search engines, and a group just using their brains. They're sitting down writing the essay without any tools at all. So the students each would write 3 essays, and then a fourth session of essays, they would have them switch. So like the ones who were writing with AI, they would say, you can't use it. The ones who wrote with AI, who didn't write with AI, were then allowed to use it, right? And so this would allow them to sort of compare and cross-examine the results with the different groups. And so while they wrote the essays, the researchers had them wear these pretty little hats that would monitor their brain activity with EEG scans, okay? And then after they wrote the essays, like right after, they would quiz the students on their memory, about what they wrote, and then they'd score the quality of their writing. They scored it using some AI tools, and they scored it with human like graders too, okay? So what did they find? When they went through and looked at how people wrote with or without AI, with or without search engines, what were some of the findings? Well, several of the key findings were a little bit alarming. And probably that's the reason this study has gotten so much attention in the news. You've probably heard about this before. It came out several weeks ago now. And so one of the key findings was that brain activity was weakest in the LLM group or in the ChatGPT group. So what does that mean? So remember, they were monitoring their brains with the EEG headset. Those people, the brain was not firing as much, wasn't doing as much work while they were writing when they were using ChatGPT to help them, right? And then by contrast, it was strongest in the brain-only group. Their brains were really working overtime. And then it was moderate in the search engine group. And that sort of tracks with what you might expect, right? I don't need a brain scan to tell me that it is a lot harder to write when I don't have the tools. And that one of the things that attracts me to using an AI is like, I don't want to think so hard. I'm just going to ask ChatGPT to write the email for me, right? And so that sort of tracks what we might expect. But here it is sort of proven empirically, yeah, that is actually, your brain is actually doing less work. Okay, so that's not super surprising. But another finding was that ChatGPT had a negative effect on memory. So on your own like physical actual memory. And so after each writing session, right, the researchers would ask the participants to quote a sentence from their essay. And 89% of the brain-only group were able to provide an accurate quote. Okay, so they just wrote it, and then the researcher would ask them, hey, share a quote from that. And they would, 89% of the time, so most of the time, they'd say a quote from it, and it would be basically what they'd written. Because they wrote it, of course. If I just wrote something, I'd be able to tell you some sentence from it, right? I mean, I wrote it. But even the search engine group was pretty high. 83% of them, they were just using search to help them, not AI. And they could quote from it, 83%. What percentage do you think of the AI-assisted group were able to quote an accurate sentence from their essay? Lock in your votes right now. It was 0%. Zero. A big goose egg. Not a single one of them was able to give an accurate quote. So, and again, you're like, that makes sense. If they're using AI to help them write it, they didn't write it. It's not registering in their minds as much. Like that kind of tracks. But it's still kind of shocking, right? Now, I want to share one more finding. The third kind of key finding that I think is a little alarming and should give us pause is the quality of the writing. And again, if you use AI tools much, you know this. The ChatGPT assisted essays use similar phrasings, similar examples, and when the teachers graded them, they noted that those essays were repetitive, they were unoriginal. They quoted one of the graders, and they said it's soulless. And again, you can, again, if you've read a lot of AI writing, or if you used it a lot, you can sort of recognize some of these patterns yourself. Like notoriously, people will point out the M dash, that long dash that uses that a lot. ChatGPT particularly, it will write sentences like, it's not this, it's this, right? So there's these different sort of formulaic ways that ChatGPT writes, that any of the AIs write, and so they were able to point that out. Okay. What do we do with all this? Well, the researchers, with these results in hand, they argued basically, hey, what we've discovered shows that an over-reliance on AI tools is going to lead to a term they coined, cognitive debt. Cognitive debt. And that just means a condition where people don't engage deeply enough to truly learn or remember. And so their idea is, if you're using these AI things, it's easier, yes, but because it's easier, you're not actually engaging, and so you're not learning and you're not remembering. Okay? So, a lot of alarm bells went off when this study came out. And granted, it's a fairly small sample size. 54 people is not that many people. They were particularly honed in on the task of writing. Understand AI can do more than just writing. But I think that your average user, that's probably what they're using AI for these days, is to help draft an email or brainstorm ideas or write an email, things like that. And so some of these, you're going to have to, can these be generalized to all AI usage, et cetera? We got to think about that. That's kind of what I want to do here, is I want to spend just the rest of our time here talking about 3 things for Christians to consider when using AI. I want to share 3 things you should consider as you're using AI as a Christian. And now let me caveat that with this, I'm not going to talk about the obvious stuff. I'm not going to talk about ethical issues like plagiarism. I'm not going to talk about, pretending you wrote something you didn't write or that kind of stuff. Like, I think there's some hopefully fairly obvious ways that you can abuse AI and using it in an unbiblical way. I want to hone in more on some wisdom stuff based on these results. And so the first thing that I think you should consider if you're a Christian when you're using AI, how do I engage with this tool? Well, first, you got to remember that it's not just what AI can do, but also what AI is doing to you. And I don't mean like the Terminator coming after you. I just mean tools change you, right? This is a lot of the focus in the news, in the media, when they talk about AI, is all about what it can do. You know, this is the worst AI is ever going to be. It's only getting better. Look at all the results. Look at all the great things it's going to be able to do. And of course, there's some fear about that. What about replacing jobs and all that? But it's all about what can it do. And I think that we need to remember that as Christians, we must not only ask, what can it do, but also, what is it doing to me? What is AI doing to me? Right? Tools shape the world, but they also shape the ones who use it, right? This is a major aspect of how we approach work as Christians, doing it in a God-honoring way, is the fact that God is developing our character through the work we're doing. And so when you use a tool, that changes the way you relate to your work. It changes potentially the way in which your character develops through that work. Let me try to flesh this out a little bit. I remember reading this book years ago. Michael Bunker is the author, and he was writing, I don't even know where I picked up this book, but he was writing on, the book was called something like Living or Surviving Off Grid. And so he was like going beyond living off grid. It was like a survivalist type thing. But the author's a Christian, and he had some interesting thoughts in the book. And one of the things he said, I think he was talking about how he was digging a fence post holes for a fence. And he was like, I could have rented an auger. I could have used tools to do it, but I dug it slowly and I had people help me, and it took way longer and it was way harder, and we spent a lot of time together, so we did it. And he had this insight where he said, maybe digging fence post holes is supposed to be hard. I've always thought about that, is in America or in the West more generally, our thoughts on productivity is if a tool can make something easier, it is therefore better. We should definitely do it, right? It's this idea that all technological progress is always good. And we often turn a blind eye to what the technology or what the tools are potentially doing to us. What have we lost in the equation, right? And I think that we're coming more and more face to face with this as AI develops, and people are saying, hey, this is taking jobs potentially. This is, people have fears about AGI or artificial general intelligence, or basically like, hey, what if this thing becomes real smart and then we're all in trouble, right? Skynet types things. But the thing I think, just in the narrow sense, just speaking of personal productivity, is some stuff, it is irreducibly hard to get the quality you want to get out of it. And so I think this is true of writing. So again, the study focused on writing, but I'm a writer. I've written books that, I write every day. And there's one thing I can tell you about writing. Writing's hard. It's really hard to write. And putting your thoughts on paper, making them intelligible and compelling to another human being, that requires extreme effort. I forget who said it. There's a quote that he said, writing is thinking, and that's why it's so hard. Something along those lines. Because thinking's hard. To think clearly, to make something actually sharp, that requires effort on our part. And when a tool like a ChatGPT comes along and it says, hey, I can actually make that easier, I can make writing easier, it's very tempting to just sort of hand it over and be like, oh, thank goodness. Like, I hate the tyranny of the blank page. I'm just going to say, hey, you start the thing for me. Here's kind of what I want to do. And it starts to generate something. You're like, that's pretty good. Right? But what have you done? You haven't just outsourced writing. You've outsourced thinking. And as this study shows, just on a purely cognitive level, the more you outsource those activities of thinking and writing, the more you're letting your mind atrophy. And the study can't show that this is probably, I should say it this way, the study can show that this is true cognitively, which they did with the EEGs and those quizzes after and stuff. But what it can't show is what it might be doing to us spiritually, is when we don't engage the way that we did before, we don't do the hard work of sitting down and coming up with ideas and shaping them into our own words. And look, there's different ways you can use ChatGPT, even for brainstorming. Like I use it. Like I have I don't know what it's called, a plus subscription to ChatGPT. So like I'm not in any of this trying to be anti AI. I'm trying to be pro. Let's be discerning with how we use it and what it's doing to us. But even sort of like brainstorming ideas and that kind of stuff, which is majority of what I use AI for, sort of as like an advanced search engine, where I'll ask it like how, like I'm redoing our laundry room right now, and I'm like, hey, what type of plywood should I get to make shelves in the pantry out of, and what are the pros and cons of the different things? Like that's really useful. Like I can't just come up with that information on my own, but there is this temptation to outsource my thinking when I'm feeling stuck, and especially with writing, to say, "Hey, ChatGPT, come up with an idea for me. You tell me what I want to write a devotional on this verse. You give me some options so I can have a starting place." And again, I'm just trying to be discerning here. Like there can be some help with that to give you a starting place, but there also is negative consequences potentially of not wrestling with your thinking first, not just instead of going to ChatGPT, going for a walk and saying, I'm just going to think about this. I'm going to pray about this, or having a conversation with a human being, God forbid, and say, hey, you be my sounding board and let's work through this together. That we just need to be aware that there's something lost in the equation potentially. We become over reliant on these things. And so you got to be careful not just thinking about, all the things AI can do, but what is it doing to me? Because what we don't want is for our brains to atrophy, right? If you don't use them, you lose them, right? If you, went into a coma and you were just laying in a bed for months, your muscles would atrophy. If you start outsourcing the hard parts of thinking and writing to an AI, because it's hard, your brain, of course, is going to atrophy. You're not going to be able to think as clearly. And so I just think we need to have some cognizance of that. And that sort of goes into the second consideration. So the first consideration is, hey, for Christians, it's not just what AI can do, but also what it's doing to me. Second, make sure you're thinking about short-term productivity versus long-term growth, right? So productivity for the Christian, I think my whole sort of shtick here with redeeming productivity is remembering that productivity is not this transactional thing. It's not a temporal thing. For the believer, we're not just saying, hey, what's the quickest way to get this task done, right? We're thinking, how do I work as unto the Lord? And that's going to mean approaching the work with the right heart, seeing my work as an opportunity for me to grow spiritually, skillfully, intellectually, right? It's a stewardship. And so we have this long-term view about productivity. It's not just about what I'm doing and accomplishing, it's about who I'm becoming, right? And so work is sort of this anvil on which we develop as people, right? God providentially gives us tasks. He gives us difficult stuff in life, and he uses that to forge us into sharp tools in his arsenal, okay? And so if I outsource or forego the hard aspects of that work, I'm also giving up sort of that long-term growth potentially, right? If I'm saying, hey, I'm going to have tools do everything for me, you can start to run into issues. Again, nothing against tools. I'm just saying we have to be discerning about them, especially tools for cognition like AI. What are you giving up? What are you trading? So I've heard teachers say this. A student will come and they'll say, hey, it's easier to have ChatGPT write the essay for me, so why wouldn't I do that? And they'll just say this out loud, like it's not a problem. They'll say, well, it's easier to have it do it. It's going to write better than me, so why would I do it the hard way? It's like, because the point was never to write the essay. The point is, as a student, is not to write the essay and say, how do I do this as easy as possible? Okay, now the work's done. The whole point of the essay was it was a tool to help you develop your thinking through synthesizing, expressing ideas, showing that you know how to actually understand these concepts at a deep level. The essay is to help train you to become a better thinker and a better writer. The whole point of writing an essay for a grade, that's just this intermediate that, like, it almost doesn't matter. And so, sure, you got the essay done, but to what end? What was the point? And so I think it's kind of obvious in a schooling situation, because the point is they're trying to get an education. And so if you're short circuiting the actual means of being educated, like you're just not writing the papers, and so you're not growing and developing, then why did you do it? Well, for a grade. What's the point of that in the long run? If you you go through school and you come out a dummy. And so likewise, I think we might use AI as adults or in work to maybe generate an email response, right? We say, this is complicated. They asked me 10 questions. How do I do this? How do I do it in a way that makes me seem nice? And you say, well, it saves time to do it this way. But I think you have to think long term, because you've also foregone an opportunity to connect with another person, right? By actually communicating with them. In some situations, okay, maybe that's fine. Maybe it is just a transactional type email. But you also are foregoing a chance to develop your own writing and thinking abilities. In the process of responding to that email, actually doing it yourself, you might realize, hey, actually, we could do this, this, and this. And you're kind of skipping all of that by outsourcing it to AI. It almost reminds me of, what was that? The movie Click, where he has like a remote where he can fast forward his life. That's kind of what we're doing sometimes when we outsource things to AI for us. We're saying, I don't want to do this hard thing. Fast forward through it. But you're fast forwarding through the growth that would have come by doing it yourself. That's sort of the point that I'm trying to make, right? So we need to be thinking about this on a longer timeline. How you use AI. I got to think about not just the productivity gains I can get on this individual task, but am I skipping out on the work that's going to help me become the person God wants me to become? Because if I outsource every interaction, every writing assignment, I'm never going to improve my writing. I'm not going to develop the relationships. I'm not going to be formed in my thinking by the difficulty of the process itself. I'll just be this mushy-brained kind of dummy pressing buttons in the computer and say, go ChatGPT, you do for me, thank you, right? And so what? And this is kind of the point of the super long-term thinking. What's the point? Why are you outsourcing all the hard work? So you can relax more? So you can chill? Is that the purpose of life? You say, I'm going to not do any of the hard stuff so that I can just watch more Netflix or not strain my brain. Like, why? Right? What are you after? And I think in the face of every new technology, the optimist is always going to assume, hey, technology can only improve life because it makes things easier for us. And what I'm trying to tell you is, hey, we have to have a definition of what it means to improve life. And for the world, that usually means less work equals better. More rest equals better. More recreation, less hardship. Those are all better all the time. And what I'm trying to say is, yes, objectively, less hard things is good in like an objective sense. But as Christians, we understand in this present state, God is working in and through us. He's growing us. He's sanctifying us. He's refining us. He's given us a stewardship, which we need to be responsible with these lives. And we're becoming something. We're in process right now. And to try to shuffle off anything that's hard as though, hey, there's no consequence to that, that's short-term thinking. Our objective with technology is not to create a heaven on earth. It's to let God work on us through our work to make us fit for heaven, right? We can use tools to help us in this, but we need to be judicious. We have to be discerning. We have to be thinking long-term about productivity. I want to be a faithful steward with my life. I don't just want to get through the day and do that as easy as possible. Okay? So that's the second consideration, is make sure you're thinking not just about short-term productivity with AI, but also what about my long-term growth? What are the trade-offs? And finally, the third consideration I would offer to you is that the alarmists are almost always right, to some degree. I'll caveat that. So it's almost a trope at this point. The moment someone urges caution about a new technology, someone's going to pop in, out of the bushes, and they're going to say, "Oh, actually, there's been alarmists about every new technology and every new age." And probably, if you look at the YouTube comments on this, there's probably going to be someone who has said that because they haven't gotten to this point of the video yet. Like, well, did you know that people were afraid of arcades? Did you know that people were against comic books? People were against the printing press. Did you know that, Reagan? I did know that, actually. And look, it's true. There have been alarmists about every new technology. People who have said, "Hey, we need to pump the brakes here. This isn't a good idea." And that's been true from the printing press to TV to video games to smartphones. Every time a new technology emerges, there's always voices who pop up to warn about it. And the people who are sort of anti-alarmists are like, "Hey, someone's already always saying that about new technology. You don't want to be the person who's saying, 'Hey, we need to be cautious about AI.'" But the detractors were almost always proven right. And I think this is something that's lost. Like, I don't understand the thought process here. Like, yes, society has survived the technological revolution, the industrial revolution, right? We've survived through these things. And yeah, we've become more prosperous through technological revolutions. But I think it's a serious exercise in selective memory to say that all of the progress with technology, all the results of it have been positive, because they haven't. The Industrial Revolution, with its economic prosperity and new opportunities, also gutted the family. It polluted the cities. It was the direct cause of many of the social problems that still exist and persist to this day. This has been studied deeply, the historical impacts of this. The advent of television, people warned about that. It brought entertainment into the homes, but it also eradicated hobbies for a lot of people. It has the warnings about it turning us dumber have been true. It's opened a portal to temptation in the center of our homes. The same could be said about the internet or social media or phones. Every new technology does take something away. It gives you something, but it also takes something away. I think the most obvious example we can relate to is GPS in your car or on your phone, right? I don't know how to get anywhere anymore. I used to. I grew up in a time where, I had to use a physical map. I had it like in the little drawer under the passenger seat, and I'd get lost. I'd pull over in a gas station. I'd open the map and be like, "I'm here. I need to get here. So I need to left, right. All that. Or later, like in like high school or college, or whatever, you go on mapquest.com and print out the map in advance. And heaven forbid you make a wrong turn, because then you're lost for forever, and that's just where you die. But GPS, I can't get anywhere anymore without GPS. I don't remember when we lived in California, I never learned the roads really. And my wife would always laugh at me because I'd be lost in our basically hometown. I lived there for 7 years, and I didn't know my way around because I just GPSed everywhere. And so, look, my point is that the story of technology is not just a story of positive progress and good stuff. Yes, it's brought prosperity. But it's also a story of the magnification of potential sin, of temptation, of making us dumber. It brings pros, but it also brings cons. And it is folly for us to only look at the positives. And so that's why with AI, I cannot get on board with the people who are like, "This is an unmitigated good. This is only it makes everything easier, therefore everything's better." No, because I'm a Christian and I understand that the technology can magnify good and also magnify bad. And I'm not trying to demonize it, but I think we got to tell both sides of the story. And one part of the story, at least specifically narrowly, as we talk about AI, it is that it outsources this very important aspect of thinking that is important for us as human beings, but as Christians seeking to steward these lives. And so my I guess caution to you would be just these three things. Make sure you're considering not just what AI can do, but what it's doing to you. Think long-term, not just short-term, about your productivity. Who am I becoming? Do I want to just make everything easier and forego the opportunity of growth? Or do I want to do things the hard way sometimes because that's how you grow, right? I do. And then third, the alarmists are almost always right about the technology. They almost always have been right historically. And this is true even of the printing press. I skipped that. People say, oh, the printing press, right? That happened. And then right with the movable type printing press, the Gutenberg. And then Martin Luther, the Protestant Reformation wasn't able to happen without the printing press. That's true. And that's God's providence. He used that for that. But it was also used to disseminate heresy and many other things too. And so again, like I just think we have to not be so just like blindly optimistic that, hey, AI is going to make my life easier and do all these things. You have to consider the longer term implications. You have to consider what God's doing. And sometimes it's good that things are hard because they're helping to develop your character. Anyway, that's my thoughts on that. I'd be curious to hear yours. Feel free to share them in the comments on YouTube or on Spotify. Thanks for listening or watching. I'll see you again here next week, Lord willing. I'm trying to get back on the train with doing these weekly. And hey, if you want to go deeper on productivity from a Christian worldview, I would urge you to check out the Redeeming Productivity Academy. Just go to redeemingproductivity.com. You can learn more. You can become a member there. We have a 9-week course curriculum. We'll help you set and reach goals. We have a community. We have workshops, all kinds of stuff that we do in there for members. And I think you're going to like it. Anyway, I'll talk to you again soon.